Hi again. I'm going to move on now to my guiding questions. And the first is, what did I find out, especially what was surprising or unexpected in my dissertation research? So obviously my rather wordy description of my study in the previous sections answers that question to some degree. But I think Wendy's question goes beyond just description. I think reflecting on what's surprising or unexpected is really important. And the best way, in my opinion, to answer this is by spending a few minutes talking about those things that I learned that can be problematic for those looking to gain support for libraries. So in the first part of my talk, describing the study, I focused on those tactics of influence we might consider using in a positive way, but I think it's equally or more instructive to think about those which can be detrimental. So continuing on this discussion about the liking lens, I'm going to note that in some instances in the study, it was really clearly stated that the library community was not well connected and indeed misunderstood the effectiveness of this element in successful work within government. So here's an example. Somebody said to me, we see that so often libraries haven't asked for an increase in 10 years, they become invisible to government. But then if you're only seeing as asking for increases, you're seen as a yapping dog, you haven't told your story and built a relationship. So the decision makers are somehow attached to your, aren't somehow attached to your story. You could be telling your story, but it's falling on deaf ears. So you can see how that can backfire as well. Another important factor in interpersonal influence is reciprocity, and there's really no surprise there. I think most importantly, we need to consider how we recognize our funders and show them our appreciation. When the opportunity for recognition is missed, it really gets noticed and it can really erode long-term relationships. When asked about this, an interviewee in my study commented, yeah, it sure does get noticed. And right now, there are no strings attached to the funding. All the libraries have to do is provide us with an annual survey and a financial statement. And many of them, it shocked me, they don't even honor a deadline. We have to chase them. There's a sense of entitlement for that money. No other sector would do that. Others in this study were less polite about that same sentiment. Here's another quote. Senior government official said, one of the first responses of a couple of trustees to the rumors of a decrease was to immediately start what I would call a complaint campaign. You can't do this to us, this isn't right, which in my estimation makes a difficult decision on the part of government a whole lot easier. They say a bunch of whiners, we're giving them more money than they ever got from us, and this is what they do, don't even bother coming to talk to us. And this example is linked to one final point that I'd like to make in this section. There's a tactic of scarcity in interpersonal influence. And we know this as buy now, they won't last at this price. We see it in retail all the time. It really describes the high value of items or services that aren't readily available. So in my study, this concept was only noted in the negative or as a null tactic. So in other words, no decision makers discussed or gave the impression that they felt like library services were unavailable or at risk of becoming unavailable. They didn't have the impression public library services were threatened to the point of closure, and they certainly didn't express that any decreases would result in the removal of indispensable services. The ability for these stakeholders to create a compelling case to them was probably hampered by stereotypes about public library trustees and librarians and senior library staff and their manner of communicating. Particularly here with the British Columbia government, the word advocacy is a real hot button to be avoided. And this point was stated repeatedly across several interviews. Somebody said the fascinating thing about it was this person, he took his role as chair as, I need to be a heavy-duty advocate. And candidly, I think the association lost a lot of ground with that approach. And another said, the perspective and the culture of the library community is about advocacy. Advocacy is viewed as a positive thing, as a core piece of what the library sector does. They advocate. And again, with respect to the culture here in government, the word advocacy is a bad word. It's certainly a loaded word, and so many people have different perspectives on what they mean by advocacy. And I got to tell you, from where I sit, my red flags go up. If somebody describes themselves as an advocate, I hear special interest group, lobbyist, somebody coming with cap in hand trying to embarrass the elected representative. That's what I hear. It doesn't do the community any favors by labeling themselves as advocates. So, perhaps the comments that most objectively indicate the lack of urgency around this kind of communication and the increase in funding allocations, it could allude to the local nature of the service. So in these provinces, over 90% of the funding responsibility is with the local municipalities. So I think this tactic warrants some additional and maybe alternative analysis in a municipal setting. Okay. It's time for me to take another technical break, so I'll be back with the final video and move on to part 4 and wrap up my talk.